I'm Tamara, and today I will walk you through all the steps that you need to know to be able to add a zipper into your own pillow. Now, do not worry. It will work on whatever pillow size you've got. I will walk you through all the steps so that you can make the correct measurements. And at the very end of this video, I will show you a pillow that I made incorrectly so that you can see the mistake I made so you don't make the same mistake. All right, let's jump into this tutorial. Oh, and if you love beginner sewing tutorials, hit that subscribe button because that's what I do here. All right, let's jump into that tutorial. Take your pillow form and you will need to measure its width and its height. You'll do this by measuring from one side seam across to the other side seam. And of course, if it's a square pillow, these measurements should match. Then grab 2 pieces of fabric and cut them at those exact measurements. We don't add any inches for our seam allowance because pillows are quite squishy. Then, if you have a serger, serge all 4 edges of both pieces of fabric. If you do not, then you'll do what I did, which is taking it to your sewing machine and just sewing a zigzag stitch around all 4 edges. This will protect the edges from fraying later on. Once you've prepped both pieces of fabric, then lay them right sides together. Make a decision on which side will be the bottom of your pillow, and we are going to mark 2.5 inches in on both bottom edges. What I try to do is make sure that those marked lines are passing my zipper metal points. So each zipper often comes with these little metal stoppers on them, and I really just hate those things. I am afraid I'm going to sew into them. So I like to make my mark just about 1/4 to 1/2 inch past those metal pieces. Once you've made your markings, then what you'll do is you will start by sewing a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and you're going to start with a back stitch. Then you are going to sew that 1/2 inch seam allowance to your first marking. Then you'll do a second back stitch before you will actually change your stitch length. So I changed my stitch length to a basting stitch length, which is essentially just a really long stitch length. It's probably the longest stitch length on your sewing machine. Then you will sew from the first marking across to the second marking, and then you will turn your sewing machine stitch length back to its normal stitch length, starting with a back stitch, then sewing to the opposite end, ending with a back stitch. As you can see here, I have a tighter stitch on the right side of my pillow, and then in that middle section, it's a lot looser. It's just a basting stitch because we will be ripping that portion of this seam out later on. Then take your 2 pieces of fabric, open them so both right sides of your fabric are laying face down, and just finger press that seam open. Then center your zipper face down so those little teeth will be face down, and you will center it along this seam, pinning it in place. Then, since you did a 2.5 inch measurement at the beginning of this tutorial, you will mark that 2.5 inch measurement once again onto your zipper. So just measure from that outer edge in 2.5 inches and draw a mark. Do that on both sides. And there's one more thing you need to do before starting to sew, and that is just making sure that the actual zipper head is down about 5 inches worth at least, and you can make sure that that zipper head is facing upwards so that when you need to pull it, you're actually able to reach it. Then we are going to sew around our entire zipper using a zipper foot. However, you are going to make sure that your needle is actually on the opposite side of your zipper foot. So it's creating a little under a 1/2 inch space from the zipper teeth to where you will be sewing. You will start at one of those 2.5 inch markings, do a little back stitch, and then start sewing down your zipper. Now, once you get to that zipper head, just stop with the needle in the down position, lift up your zipper foot, and then you will be able to pull that zipper head out of the way. Then you can just put your zipper foot back down and sew all the way down to that bottom edge. Pivot, sew across your zipper, and when you're sewing across those zipper zipper teeth, I actually do go back and forth a few times to secure the end in place because it's not where that little metal piece is on the zipper. And then of course you'll pivot again and go back up the other side. And once you've made it to the other side, you'll sew across again, going back and forth a few times before you finish with a final back stitch. Oh, and of course, when you get to that zipper head, make sure you move it out of the way. Now it's time to open up our basting stitches. So that was the section between our two regular stitches where we finished with a back stitch both times. So when you rip open these basting stitches, the rest of your stitches should not come apart. So just grab a seam ripper, push it in with that point first, just getting the seam started, but then turn it over because that little red ball is meant to go within and between the fabric to protect the rest of the fabric from getting damaged. Once you've opened up that basting stitch, then just remove all of the excess threads. Now before we sew our final seam, make sure that that zipper is open halfway. We need it open halfway, that way we can turn our pillow right side out later on. Then you can lay both fabrics right sides together once again and pin along all three edges. On the two bottom edges where the zipper is, just make sure that those two are laying nicely together when you're pinning it shut. Now we will sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance around all three sides. However, there is one important step that I highly recommend you do. You will obviously start with a back stitch, sew up one side, but before you pivot around your corner, do another little back stitch again, then pivot, then do another little back stitch and continue across the top. When you get to that other point, do the same thing, a back stitch, then pivot, another back stitch, and then sew all the way down to the bottom, ending with a back stitch. These extra back stitches will secure your corners nicely. Now it's at this point that we need to prepare those 4 corners. Now for myself, the fabric that I'm using is actually a thinner fabric, so I really did not want to clip away my corners. But if you are using a thicker type of fabric for your pillowcase, then I do suggest clipping away all 4 corners, of course avoiding your seam allowance. If you have a pair of pinking shears, this is a great time to use them. Otherwise, just snip away those corners. Turn your project right side out, and then gently with your finger, just push those points out the way that you like them. Then insert that pillow and zip it up. As you can see here, I do have a little flap over top of my zipper, and the way that we got that flap was by using our zipper foot but not using it to sew right up against those teeth, instead using it to give us that almost a 1/2 inch space from the zipper teeth to our seam, and that created this nice flap. As you can see here, this pillow, I did it the other way where I made sure my needle was really close to the zipper teeth, and it looks good. I was happy with the outcome, but the actual zipper head does not tuck within the flap, so I can see it when it sits on my couch and it drives me crazy. And it is that easy to add a zipper into a pillow form, but wait, I actually have a second method which I think is pretty cool, so let me show you what that is. As you can see here, I've got this gorgeous pillow. This is the front, this is the back, and I've added a zipper just underneath that flap. This method is just as easy as the method that you just saw, if not a little easier actually. So I will link to this tutorial in the description down below. I hope that you guys have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.